Hello, I'm James, and I'm an old guy in Europe. Hello and welcome to this very special episode of An Old Guy in Europe. In this episode, I share a feature Good Morning Portugal Show dedicated to Movember, International Men's Health Month, from November of 2021, just 1 month after arriving in Portugal. I had the honor and pleasure of being a panel member for this discussion, and I hope my part in it will in some small way help to educate, inform, and support this important annual event. So I invite you, as always, to please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
28 there. Hola, bon dia, alegria. Carl Munson here from expatsportugal.com with the Good Morning Portugal live stream and a special one for you this morning. After 9 o'clock, we are having the massive Movember man chat. And half the audience listening already are going to be appearing on the show, I think, a little bit later on. We have 6 men to speak to you and in this fascinating Movember month. I'll just give you a quick preview of what's going on in Portugal with Movember, just to see if we can change it up a little bit. Currently in Portugal, we have Movember month, and they've raised the princely sum of, not $0 there. It's not, from my point of view, it's not about the fundraising. It's about the other things that you can see on the screen there: men's health, mental health, and suicide prevention, prostate cancer, testicular cancer. Know thy nuts is their guide here. Testicles, get to know what's normal and what's not. And I'm giggling. There's an indication, isn't there, of where we're at. A grown man giggling about such matters. And being a man, men's health, 5 things every man should know. So that's the gist of it, really, Movember. And that's why we want to bring it to your attention. And we have been accused of just growing facial hair and not talking about things, which is the whole point of Movember, is it not? So we're dealing with that by bringing 5 excellent chaps from our community. South Africa, UK, Americans who now live in Portugal, of course, a Brummie, that's going to be interesting. And Professor Jean Hern joins us as a bit of a keynote with reflections from a clinical experience of how men present themselves in hospital, which should be interesting. Into our hour of the massive Movember man chat. And here to join us straight away is the Prof Jean Hern from California. Hey. Hello, thank you so much for staying up. Well, you had a little bit of a snooze, didn't you, Jean? And you're staying up late for us to talk to us on this auspicious occasion. So thanks for doing that. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so thankful and honored to be a part of the show. I've been a secret listener for many months, but usually not in real time. So this show accompanies me on hikes and walks mostly.
Oh wow, okay, that's so nice to hear. Do feel free to send us a photo of your lovely hikes and walks whilst you're listening to the show. That would be superb, and we'll put them on the screen, and then you can enjoy them again. Maybe
exactly.
While you're
great, perfect.
All right, and Hank's already giving you a kind of greeting here. What are we going to get? Some cool ER stories. You slipped and fell on a what? Probably not on this occasion. That maybe they might invite you to the man cave for some of that, for sure. But you very kindly, yeah, I'm sure you do. You very kindly offered to step in with a medical perspective here on how men really present themselves in a medical situation. This is the criticism. This is what Movember's about, isn't it? To get men to open up and discuss these things and to be more diligent in perhaps in their self-awareness and self-examination. What's your view on this, Gene?
It's something that's obviously developed over many years. Full disclaimer, I'm an emergency medicine physician. So half of my patients are men. But what's really interesting is that I think, I was listening to the show from yesterday and Andy the doc, long-time listener, first-time caller, exactly. So Andy the doc had some really great points. Men's health, I think there are some global issues, and then there are some sort of system, individual organ systems issues that we might discuss that are, I think, probably that that present themselves in that people generally have a hard time sort of, unless it's really dramatic, or even sometimes if it is dramatic, they can't talk about it. They can't even like tell it to the triage nurse. So frequently people will come in with a minor, complaint like, oh, I've got this and such, or I sprained my ankle or something. And literally I will spend, 20, 30 minutes, wrapping up everything, doing all their charts, or here's a prescription, or you need an x-ray. And they're like, hey doc, there's one more thing I need to talk to you about. I'm like, we literally call it the out the door question. You're like, grab the door and you're like, all right, take care. And, follow up. And they're like, doc, there's one more thing. And you're like, oh, here it is. So I've now, gone to so is there anything else? Is there one more thing you need to tell me? Because that's frequently it. And, and frequently it involves, something, maybe, exposure, STD, or, something strange. And they're like, there's this thing happening. I need to talk to somebody about it, but I didn't want to say it out loud. I didn't want to, even though, and I think that's part of it. And so I think there are specific issues, specifically about screening. Exactly. The Columbo question. Well done. So there are health screening questions or health screening issues that I think men are particularly terrible at. Yeah. We just have a few bits of plumbing that are different from the rest of the population. And that makes, screening in about those areas really difficult to talk about and to do. And so testicular cancer is actually one of the big ones that we are horrible at. And I cannot tell you how many young men I've seen who have they had a mass or they had something and they didn't want to say anything, because they were like, maybe they were in their early 20s, or, I mean, this is sort of the classic, and their chief complaint is respiratory, something, they're prolonged cough, or they're having some weird shortness of breath, or weight loss, or what we call secondary symptoms in the emergency department. And you take a chest x-ray and you're like, what the heck is going on in your lungs? And we're like, whoa, stop. And then we do what we call the nook and cranny exam. We're like, let's just something strange here. So and we're like, okay, so this, there's something on your testicle. Have you noticed this before? And it starts the conversation of like, this is already metastasized to your lungs because you didn't pay attention to it. You didn't want to talk about it. No one encouraged you to do testicular exams throughout your life. And I mean, I cannot tell you how many times people come in when it's not too late. I mean, testicular cancer is it's treatable. It's not great. But after things have already metastasized. And so that's a classic one. I wouldn't, as Andy said yesterday, I wouldn't recommend people do their own prostate exams.
I realized that after I suggested it, I realized that wasn't maybe such a good idea. But
I'm like, no. But those are the sort of those are the classic ones where people typically aren't willing to talk about things. And then the one we really haven't talked about is the mental health one, and that is super dramatic. In that the whole notion of sort of talking about being vulnerable, talking about your needs, talking about sort of when you're not going, you're going through a rough patch, like people just don't do that. And what's really challenging, and I think James mentioned this before, is that the suicide rate for men is actually quite significant. And men the suicide success rate, rather, that men typically are more successful in committing suicide. And what's really sad, is that the older you get, the higher the suicide rate. And so it's actually sort of crazy, but over age 85, the suicide rate is actually quite high. And the risk factors are crazy. I mean, it's like social isolation, some sort of chronic disease, and this, a sense of losing independence and that sort of thing. And so actually elderly male suicide is pretty significant.
No idea about that. Wow.
Yeah. And of course, in the United States, it's, people who are older are have access to, or many people, not just old people, have access to firearms. And so that's pretty significant.
Right.
And so older people also are more methodical about how they plan their suicide. So they're typically more successul, because they're like,
Good.
this is,
I had no
yeah,
idea.
yeah, it's really, it's really sad. I'll share an experience actually of mine. My mom's second husband was getting older. He was 92. He lost his independence. He was starting to lose his independence. That we were starting to have conversations about maybe we should have somebody to come in and help you a little bit. And he grew up in the Depression, and the whole idea of like spending money to like to have somebody to come in to help him was just horrible. So yeah, he was a victim of depression, and he ended up killing himself. And it was tragic. It was just horrible, and it was because he sensed this loss of independence,
Yes.
and that he was always a really robust character. He was an electrician. He climbed electrical poles, and that whole sense of like losing his balance. He had a little vertigo issue. It was too much for him to consider that he was going to be a burden on anyone else, and
Wow.
it was too much. And that's
Yeah.
and that's that classic thing of like men not being willing to like talk about their issues, asking for help, finding help. Like people don't know like where to reach out for mental health resources and that sort of thing. And I think that's actually that's fairly common, that people aren't willing to make those to make those connections, and to reach out and find out like what's actually available for you. COVID's been really interesting because it's allowed people a lot of healthcare workers have been able to sort of reach out for mental health resources. And I think that has opened up a lot of conversations about burnout and resiliency and that sort of thing. And so that crosses gender lines obviously, but it allows people to maybe start talking about some of those needs.
Amazing. Okay, and obviously you are at the emergency end of this, and that's what you get to see. What do you think? I mean, you touched on it to some extent there, but what's the solution here? Movember is part of a broad solution, isn't it, to bring it to people's attention? What are you seeing that's working, do you think, from your other colleagues in the medical world?
Yeah, part of it is it's hard to say what really is working. In terms of like it's awareness. It's finding like connections and realizing social media has done a lot for us to sort of talk about suicide rates and a lot of other bad things that are happening, but like starting to have those conversations to say you're no less of a man if you have like mental health is another health problem.
Yeah.
And sort of normalizing the behavior of like, I'm reaching out because I have struggles with such and such, and it might be, substance use or alcohol use or depression or anxiety. And
Yes.
like Ted Lasso, I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso.
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, Ted Lasso is a show. It's a TV show. It's based on it's on it's on Apple TV, but it's a show actually about an American football coach who gets hired by an English football team to be their coach, like on purposely hired to like tank the team because the owner doesn't want them to succeed. And
Right.
it's a comedy, but it actually has brought out a lot of issues about mental health and mental illness, and because he suffers from some of it, and it's like really well done. And it's a comedy, but it actually just brought out some really good conversations for people to say, mental health is something that it's like any other kind of health. It may not be like the pneumonia you're having or the sore throat, but it's something else that needs to be dealt with. It's a chronic disease sometimes, and it needs to be addressed.
Yes, indeed. Okay, Prof. Gene Hern, thank you so much for joining us and teeing things up for us like that. Really appreciate it. I'm going to bring those 5 chaps on. Would you want to stay with us for this, or do you need to go to bed?
Okay, no.
All right.
I'm happy to stay.
I didn't want to impose upon you because you might have other things to do, like look after people in an emergency setting, which is possibly slightly more important. But let's bring them on. All right, they can wait.
They've already waited for 12 hours. What's an extra hour or two? Whatever.
Let's bring on, in no particular order, the aforementioned James Holly, a fellow Californian, now an Erisarian, which is not a kind of philosophy, but he lives in the town of Ericeira in Portugal. Good morning to you, James. How are you?
Good morning.
All right, great to have you here. Stephen Wells, who's here. because of his recent profundity on the man cave, which I hope you'll be able to sum it up once more. You hope you'll get that up again, Stephen. Francis is here. Francis, the genesis of this really bringing to our attention November, and you put it on my agenda. You've got me growing this, Francis. Thank you very much for that. And
you're doing it better than I am.
appreciate your inspiration in this matter. Looking forward to your contributions. Man Cave host, Portuglish, aka Andrew Gilchrist, Andy, who's been cracking some great jokes, like "Don't borrow Jean's pen," I think, in the comments earlier on.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning, Andy. Good morning to you. And of course, last but not least, certainly not, Garvo, who was showing his softer side there. Is still there. What's your cat's name? Your pussy's name there, Garvo?
Spud.
Spud. How is Spud?
Yeah, he's just coming and he's soaking wet and just left his paw prints all over my lap.
As they do. Okay. So, gentlemen, if you could mute up if you're not speaking, we'll save on a lot of echoes. But if you can't, if you just hear something and you desperately need to speak to it, unmute and jump in. Okay. But Stephen, somebody said about you that you said something really incredible in the man cave. Is it possible to sort of summon that spirit back up again?
Yeah. It was in the closing statements of whenever we do a man cave at the end, we always have a little round the room of how's everyone been, what's it been like, and we'd mentioned Movember a couple of times, either throughout the show or within someone's closing statement. And for me, it's growing a moustache, and there's it's a lot of different arenas you see this in. You see the raise awareness side of it. Lots of people talk about it and say, oh, we should be talking about this. Well, yes, we should. And the fact that we've ended up here and we're now talking about it is great. But in the man cave, my question was, what are we doing about it? And especially with Movember, there's, as you showed on the Portugal website, there's 3 or 4 or 5 different things that Movember now covers. I don't know which one it started out as, but I've been watching a couple of YouTube channels where they've been going down the prostate cancer. And in the man cave, we were talking about mental health. And it's what is the message that people are getting out there by growing a moustache? And for me, it's the mental health side. And the thing that I went to is, what are we doing about it? Who have you phoned up? Who have you not heard from in a while? What actual action have you taken for yourself? Have you phoned someone? Have you asked for help? Because there's a lot of times, and the analogy I thought of yesterday was, we hear a lot about men don't ask for help. They don't have the vocabulary for it, I think was a comment in the comments a minute ago. We do. We don't hear. We don't listen in the way that it's being said. If I go quiet, if I withdraw, that's me asking for help in my head somewhere. And people reaching out, that when you're in a good place or a better place, to go, oh, I haven't heard from Carl for a while, should I give him a call? And when someone says, oh, no, I don't want to talk, it's not I don't want to talk necessarily, and this is from my experience, it's I don't want to talk to you about this. So if my mum asks me if I'm okay, and she's going to get, yeah, I'm fine. Yes. Because I don't want to tell my mum where I'm not good or where things have been going on. So even within a group of friends, if I say to Garvo, is Carl okay? And Garvo spoke to you a couple of days ago, and you go, yeah, he's fine. He said he was fine. Don't do that. Don't do that. If you're worried about someone, ask them yourself rather than a third hand version of it, because it may be that they just couldn't talk to that person about it. So if we're all worried about one person here, we should all phone that person up and ask them ourselves. Amazing. So don't leave it. Don't hand off the concern. Yeah, don't do the passive side of it. If someone's drowning, they're flapping about in the water, we don't talk about how many life vests there are. We do something about it. Yeah, and we all do so. We don't go, oh no, they're stood next to one, we'll leave it to them. We should all be doing something about it.
Well said. So there's an action point for us there to just act on that thing. If you are concerned about somebody, actually, I've done this in the last couple of days. I thought about people and just thought, instead of just thinking, I should drop them a line and see how they do. So you would encourage that, Stephen, and that's the point being made there, as well as growing a moustache. Because I think, Gary, wasn't it Linda who said this? You blokes are just doing all this facial hair business and you're not really actually changing anything.
It was actually. She saw the article we were on about, and said, "Well, yeah, I can see that you've grown a beard, or your moustaches, but what does that mean to people? What does it say? How do you explain the message? It's not very clear. It's just a load of lazy blokes growing whiskers, really." To the
lazy blokes growing whiskers. Okay, that's one of the reviews we've had so far. Then to go alongside reaching out and actually doing something, as Stephen says there. Andy, we heard from you as well. I don't know how much you want to talk about this, and I understand if you don't want to, but you had a difficult situation from work, which prompted a lot of concern from the rest of us, and is certainly connected to this. Andrew.
Yeah, very unfortunate. As I work in academia. This month of November, we had a student commit suicide, and it seems to be quite a cruel thing in the UK where the funerals, there's such a backlog of processing this sort of end of life event. It takes between 2 and 3 weeks to get a funeral kind of coordinated and executed, but carried out. And so this funeral was yesterday for the student. So it's kind of like you've got the first kind of shock and awe of this event. Then you've got a period of kind of processing it. And then you've got the next wave of shock and awe. It's like, oh, it's actually real, because now there's the funeral to kind of deal with it. So that was yesterday. So again, it's been a bit of a glum week at work. Obviously, this has been rough on the students, but also on the staff. I've also, not that they'll watch, but I will commend my colleagues immensely for the work they've done this month as well. But also, it's part of our role as, if you like, as not only teacher, if you like, but it's also social worker, mentor,
elder,
model. Right? It's a kind of, we wear many hats in the role that we do, but again, we're only human. We can't maybe influence or reach out to everyone. It also kind of feels a bit of a failure.
There's two things there. You make the claim or state that we're only human. I mean, that's pretty helpful in many ways, isn't it? To say that and to acknowledge that we are only human and we're all struggling with these same sort of issues together. And what might the solutions and helps be in that? But yeah, I mean, what a terrible situation. And to me, hearing about that, what do you say to young people? In the aftermath of something like that, I think we have to have something good and useful to offer them, as well as taking care of their, like with the way that you work, Jean. There's the emergency, and then there's the long-term care, isn't there? And perhaps Movember is an emergency thing, and we need to be considering deeply the long-term care. Talking of which, James Holly is a psychotherapist, takes care of people's long-term mental health. I would like to think. What's your view on this, James?
So much. I did want to address part of this is the how do I want to put this? Men tend to not want to go very deep in their thinking around relationship. So this "how you doing, man" goes to "I'm fine." But if we go a little deeper and get vulnerable and transparent and honest, "I'm concerned about you, and I'm wondering if anything's going on that I might be able to help with." Yeah. That's an honest, vulnerable, transparent communication that makes it very difficult to go, "I'm fine." Because even in that statement, you're going to see it in that your friend's eyes that he's not fine, because he knows at that point, he knows he's lying to you because you've gotten deeper. You've asked a true question about his well-being. So, and that goes to so much historically, how we're trained as boys to not do that. Very little of it is actually our DNA. There's very few differences between males and females researched along the way. But where we become very, very different is in the training we get as we grow up. And boys are trained, we got to have it all together. We're not supposed to be weak. If we're sick, we're weak. If we don't have an answer, we're weak. There's all this stuff that puts us in what I call the man box, which leads to this lack of communication, this lack of vocabulary and language to use to support each other. So the big piece of it for me always is awareness, raising awareness and education around it. And doing it differently. And I think we're doing a much better job around that than historically. We're moving forward in terms of that it's okay to cry. It's okay to have feelings. It's okay to communicate feelings. It's getting better, but we're still dying by killing ourselves at a more successful rate, a faster rate than women. Statistically, and I'll leave it at this, the second leading cause of death, teenage death in the United States is suicide. Second to car accidents.
Yeah.
Right. Car accidents usually due to alcohol, but that's a pretty stunning statistic.
It is, isn't it? At both ends of life. As Gene was saying there, I didn't realize that about older men and at the teenage end, these two incredible times in life where you think people might be enjoying life to the fullest in their respective ways. The glory of life as a teenager and the reflection on life as an elder. How sad it is that people are in that state. Gene, I'll come back to you. I just want to include Francis very quickly, but we'll definitely come back to you, Gene, in just a moment. Francis, you might have a perspective, a national perspective. You tune in from Cape Town most mornings, and we're very grateful to you for that. I think as well, it could be youthful good looks, or that you just are a bit younger than the rest of us here. You may have a sort of younger man's perspective on that. What's your view on this, and are you glad to be here?
I'm glad to be here. It's very cool to be part of this, and I'm honored to be part of it. And yeah, I think that I took the route of growing a moustache in the beginning. And I think in the beginning it was about testicular cancer and prostate cancer. And from there it progressed and it became more about men in general and men's health in general. And the one thing that, I've talking about Gene in him saying Ted Lasso. In this year and watching the first season and into the second season of that show, I've seen so much of myself in Ted Lasso. It's a guy who keeps quiet, wants to be positive, wants to be the strong one, wants to hide his emotions and not let anybody know, not let anybody in. And as a result, a guy who is the most positive of positive people is falling apart. And I'm gonna throw in a quick thing that I got a scare in August this year. I was standing at my work desk and some news came to me and I got quite angry in the moment and I just collapsed. I lost my legs, I lost my arms, I lost everything. I just fell on the floor. And in movies, you always see a panic attack as something where somebody hyperventilates. But I had some of the symptoms of tunnel vision, and I completely lost my legs. I fell to the side of the desk, and I held myself between two counters, and then my arms gave in, and I fell on the floor. I broke a glass next to me. I couldn't move. I couldn't get to my phone. I couldn't let my wife know that I'd fallen. And at that moment, I feel like life changed completely. Like I never thought I'd have a panic attack. I always thought I was the guy that would always have it together, because I'm positive. I'm always finding the bright side of life, And when that happened, I just realized we're fragile as men. No matter how strong we are, no matter how strong we want to be, no matter how together we want to show ourselves, we are still fragile. And at the moment, there's so much we put on ourselves, and I remember I had a big work deadline. I had a lot of stuff going on. It was my wife's birthday coming up, and I just collapsed. I had no idea. She drove me back that evening, and I just stared out the car, and I just had no idea what had happened to me, because I hadn't been to the doctor yet. I thought something had happened with my heart, and it was just too much at that point. And I think Movember takes on a whole new meaning for me now, because I might not suffer from the others. Granted that I'm also quiet, and I haven't gone to the doctor and said, well, can you check this? Can you look at that? Can you make sure? Because I'm too proud, or it's awkward. But yeah, to the point that I realized, well, maybe the mental health side of things is the part that strikes home, especially watching Ted Lasso with a new set of goggles, because I did watch it a second time, to say, wow, this guy had a panic attack, and he was the nicest, sweetest, most positive guy.
Amazing.
And it can happen to anyone.
That's clearly. Wow. And we need to know what happened next. I mean, did you got checked up, and what was it thought to be?
I went to the doctor the next morning, and he said that not all panic attacks are a hyperventilating state. It can happen that your whole body just shuts down, and my body just shut down. And it was a panic attack. Yeah, I think I did. I had a hard reboot.
Yes, a hard reboot. Wow, that's one way of looking at it for sure, isn't it? Thank you, Francis, so much for that, and thanks for initiating this, because you were the sort of beginning of this. Vitor Costa saying bonjour, and Rebel Mama. I was thinking of things we have on TV in the USA called PSAs, public service. There is a PSA count, isn't there, to do with the prostate? But this is public service announcements. Maybe they do have them, and I haven't watched TV in years. Yes, I'm going to ask them. This is about, I think, checking. Elra's got a great suggestion. Have your significant other do a check and return the favor. Guaranteed no one will miss a check. I know what I'm doing after the show. Thunder's going off. We'll look at the replay later on. The effects of COVID on a whole generation of men, from students who have had no social interactions and even been locked in expensive university education, to the elderly, as Jean alluded to. This is a serious problem for sure, isn't it? Beverly, my partner found out he had prostate cancer in 2019, had surgery in December. Sorry, I'll stop hiding you all in just a moment. And the doctor said, let's test your PSA levels whilst you hear public service announcement levels. He was lucky, so to speak, but even so, his cancer had spread out with the prostate in that short time. So went to have radiation therapy 2020 and has had his last hormone injection on 31st December. Please, men, says Beverly, don't hold back going to the doctor. Yes, life is half hard afterwards, but well said, Beverly. Thank you for taking the time to put that up. In case of any boohoo men sort of sentiments, where we live in a patriarchy, we have the best of it in many ways, don't we, collectively as men? Deborah makes a great point. The patriarchy hurts men as much as it does women. So proud of you all. The paradox is strength is in being vulnerable. Thank you for that, Deborah, for that shout out and reference to the patriarchy there. Jean, you wanted to add something before?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say to Francis, thanks. That was amazing. I mean, thank you for sharing that. That was, again, I think the issue is that we need to normalize that these things happen. I spent many years in my career being the program director for the residency, the training program for emergency residents. They're the specialty training for ER, and I spend a lot of time counseling my residents and referring them to people, and part of it was like, look, we all have issues. Sometimes we think we need to think of mental health as a short-term fix. Like maybe it's like the cast, where you wear the cast for a few weeks or a couple months, and and the bones heal. Sometimes therapy is a short-term thing, and I've had therapy when my parents got divorced, and I had therapy years ago when I was dealing with marital issues, and yeah, you need a reference for a therapist. Here was the person I used. They were great. There are a lot of other people that are available for resources, and it is totally fine to say, look, it's okay to reach out. It may just be a short-term thing, and a lot of times people think about going into therapy as being like you have diabetes. Like it's a forever thing. It doesn't have to be, but sometimes people need to learn the communication tools or learn how to talk about their feelings or how to talk about certain aspects of their life. And that can be a short-term thing, and people just need the tools, and we need to normalize the idea that people can reach out.
Thank you, Gene, for that. Go on, Garvo. Please jump in, fellas, because I know it has turned into a bit like. But what's really lovely, we are looking at the massive Movember Man Chat. Instead of just growing tashes, we're actually talking about it, not just talking about it. There's some personal testimony here, which is really important. And it's not a panel of men trying to fix things instantly and trading opinions and trying to win over each other yet. But this is a great start and a fine example. So well done, chaps. But I don't need to chair this necessarily. Say what you've got to say. Speak out. Garvo's next.
I had a bit of a sleepless night about today because it's a thing that's very, very close to me. This is I've known people who have committed suicide. You work with the military and you see some tremendously damaged people. I've had friends, and you realise certain things and certain factors. It's no one big sort of picture as why men try to commit suicide. It's a whole range of things, really. But from the moment that we're born, and being old school, you're taught as a man to be tough and, responsible and all the things that probably we shouldn't be. But we also are quite competitive with each other as men. And we find it difficult sometimes to be open and talk about our problems because that makes us not so competitive because we're weaker in our own minds. Bless them, on the man cave, right? We do this in a different way. We can still talk about our problems, yeah. We can still talk about this, that, and the other, and we still compete. We still compete for our viewpoints and the way we do things and what we say, but we do it in a safe environment. But I know that these two guys at the left and the right, if I'd got a problem now, I could dial them up, talk to them, and they would listen. They might not be able to solve the problem, but just talking to that person because I trust them now. Because in a sense, I know they've got my back, is a great sort of asset. And there's a key to it, right? One of the best things you can say to a bloke is, don't worry, I've got your back. Yeah. Whatever happens, I'll be there for you. That's a big thing. That's a big thing because then that shows trust building up. And trust amongst men is very important. And that's what we do, or try to do every week, really. And, we formed our little club, a little brotherhood. So the more members we get to talk in our little club and the more we can protect each other, the better. That's the way that I see it.
Cheers, Garvo. And let's get Andy to talk about that now, because so the idea there is that if men are competitive and you want to talk about your problems, you can have a competition who's got the worst problems. Is that how it works, Andy?
Well, sometimes it might be like, oh, you were poor, you were lucky, kind of thing, like that Monty Python sketch.
Yes.
But the reality is, again, some background to those that haven't seen the Man Cave. Maybe there's some ladies or some new watchers that kind of don't know the background. Is Carl used to host the Man Cave with Frank as well, wasn't it?
Yes, Agavo. That was the original lineup. Yeah,
Agavo. Yeah, sorry. When I first sort of happened across it, within a few weeks, Carl was like, I'm gonna stop doing this. I've got a life to have and kids and everything else. And so I kind of stuck my hand up and said, I think there's value in this. I'll carry on with it. And it's just a kind of resource, if you like, more than anything. That if you are planning to migrate to Portugal, or if you've migrated to Portugal, maybe this is a kind of completely separate bunch of people that you can befriend or talk to or confide in or hang out with. Because I guess some people, they move countries, they might have a bit of a different existence to what they've come from. They might not have the network of people they had from another country, or you might want to do some networking, or they might just want to have someone they can chat to. So I saw the kind of value in maintaining this, and again, I do this for the laugh, really. But on the more serious side of things, is like we have built a little community of guys, haven't we? And I've always tried to make this as a safe space. It's respectful, but there's banter. we can be frank as we like, as far as I'm concerned. And also, if someone wants to outreach, privately, then I'm happy to speak to anyone. Absolutely, more than happy.
Thank you, Andy.
And maybe Man Cave will only be in my hands for so long. Maybe someone else might want to take the reins for a while, I have no plans in stopping doing it for sure for the moment. But it would be nice to think that this would be a kind of self-sustaining entity that will be there ad infinitum, maybe for people that either are interested in Portugal or guys that maybe want to do some guide chat or separate to their kind of current network or something like that. So.
Thanks, Andy. Let everybody know when it's on. So how do people tune in? How do people become a part of it?
Well, it's we've got an expat Man Cave Portugal group on Facebook, and I post the links there. It's also on YouTube. It's streamed through my YouTube channel, which is capital letters Portuglish, which is what is on my banner down below me. And also, if you go to my Portuglish, you can find my email if you want to join the actual guest on the Man Cave. You can also send a message on when it's on live, and I can send you the link. But it's anyone who's been on before. Every week I send them the link. But it's the nice thing is it's kind of purely optional. It's a drop in. So sometimes some of our regulars are busy on that weekend. So there's other people jump in. It's not the same faces. Typically, it's fairly mixed. There are some regulars. Joel is the only, I think, main staple, and we love Joel. Joel's amazing.
Yeah.
It's anyone's welcome. It's a safe space. We won't judge or sorry, Garvey, go on.
I've just got a question I'm going to throw in there because I don't remember things too well these days. I'm getting on a bit. I wanted to ask this, that if we look at a woman's response to emotion, it's usually, and it's difficult to generalize, but they can express emotion a lot better. They'll talk to friends. They'll blow a bit of steam off. They'll get some consensus, really. And blokes don't normally do that. But like I said, as we're brought up as children and young men, it's almost like you're encouraged to suppress your emotions. So do we ever really emotionally develop as people? And when something traumatic comes along, right, it hits you like a steam train because we're not really used to it. And we can't vent that. So what do we do with that? Now, as far as emotional maturity is concerned, I'm always going to be 12, right? In my own head, I'm always going to be a 12-year-old.
I've noticed that.
When I get situations, probably I don't react to them as well as I should. And I tend to try and find a way to vent that situation. And many, many men only know aggression because that's one way they can only throw it out. So just interested to hear the panel's views on that one.
An excellent point. Just saying poo-poo when bad things happen, Garvo, is not a very appropriate or mature response, but we're working on it. Francis, I know, wanted to add something. Then we'll come to you, Stephen.
I just wanted to say that we had something a while ago where we did exactly what happens in the Man Cave. And we used to have a couple of guys that got together, and beer is the excuse. So you get together for beers and you all talk around the table, and it's very surface level. And we called it a mandate, by the way. So it had to happen. It was a mandate. It was like, it worked out well. And then you found that guys would talk to each other, when things got a bit difficult, or when it was too loud, and they started to, they realized they needed it. They realized they needed a group of guys that could get together and actually have a conversation with each other. And with time, new guys joined, and it became a thing. So I agree with you totally. You need to have that sort of thing and make it a mandate. Make it something that you have to do.
Okay, brilliant, Francis. And we've got some great comments coming in. Stephen?
Yeah, so it kind of ties together a couple of bits that James mentioned and Garve just mentioned. So vulnerability versus competition. Vulnerability to me isn't just about me sharing, isn't about me spilling my guts saying this is how weak or whatever it is I feel. Reaching out to someone and saying, I'm worried about you, And this isn't going to be a competition in the conversation that we then have from that statement, which is where Garbe's saying we banter and that. But to be able to turn around to someone and say, I can have a conversation with you, and I'm not going to make these random jokes that we were all making in the comments about Balzac and those kinds of things, because we turn to humour a lot of the time to divert or deflect from the sensation that's going through us. When we're stressed, there's a nervous laugh, and we'll crack a joke to deflect from where we are. So to be vulnerable enough to turn around to someone and say, I can have a conversation with you, and I'm conversation with you, where we can put all that stuff aside, and I'm not going to judge you, I'm not going to ridicule you, I'm not going to humiliate you, and you can say it. And I probably won't have the solution to whatever it is you're going through, but at least we can try and work out what the solution might look like, or where you might need to ask, who you might need to ask for help, or what you might need to do about it. And to take that competition out of it, again, we're brought up not to be doing that, or we're not taught how to do that, rather than we're not in a place to do it. But being able to communicate that to someone, that you can do that, you are able to do that. And even in the past, I've had conversations with people where it got to the point where I put my hand up and went, I can't cope with this anymore. I'm not going to pretend that I'm the one that can support you in this anymore. So let's find you someone that can support you better. But at least it got them started, and they recognized something that they recognized that I could signpost them to that, rather than I could actually help them.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen.
Not being ashamed of being able to provide, and again, we're solution orientated. So if we can't provide the solution, a lot of the time we'll go, I can't do that.
Yeah. Well, so let's go to Andy, and then I want to talk to James about the whole thing. Andy, did you not want to add something?
Do you want to go to James first?
Yeah, because what I wanted to find out with James is some men haven't been to a therapist or a counsellor and might feel uncomfortable about doing so. I wonder if you might sort of moderate that experience, James. I remember the first time I went, it was suggested by a general practitioner in the UK that I go see a counsellor. So I thought, okay, that's fine. And it was one of these counsellors with that does a freebie. It was trainee counsellors, so it was cheap therapy. And I don't mean to diminish the power or usefulness of it. So I got to this place and I sat down, and the guy said, "Okay, so what seems to be the problem," or something like that. And I started crying, and was, I think, crying for quite some time in front of this person and talking to them. And then after about 20 minutes or something, he said, "Well, this isn't actually the session. I'm just trying to find out which therapist might work best for you." But it was useful. It was useful. James, what's it like going to see a therapist or a counsellor for the first time for men who might say, my dad, I'm sure, God rest his soul, if that had been suggested to him by his, he was an ex-copper, national service ex-copper. If a GP had said to him, maybe you should speak to a counsellor, Michael, he'd have said, I'm not doing that. How can we make this easier for blokes to go see a counsellor or a therapist?
Yes, I'm really want to address that. But first, I really want to acknowledge what Steve was saying. And that the first thing that hit me as you were talking, Steve, was this is the ultimate having your mate's back. What you just talked about, being vulnerable, saying I'm there for you. I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm not going to put you down. I'm not going to compete with you. I'm going to listen to you. That is the ultimate having someone's back right there. So good job. Was perfect. Yes. What I have found in my practice, and again, I understand a big part of my work is understanding that everything I'm getting is through the filter of the person who's talking to me. I've had teens tell me how horrible their parents are and they don't understand me and they don't all this stuff. And then I meet the parents and I go, no, where are your parents? Right? It's like, wait, these are different people than this person described to me. So I really have to understand I'm getting through their filter and not take a side, but just hear them. That's the other point, is just listening. You don't have to be a professional therapist to help someone who's struggling psychologically, mentally, in whatever way. The biggest healer is your capacity to just simply listen. not fix, not give advice, not joke, just listen. And Carl, I think that's what happened with you. You got into a space where either you felt safe enough to just let it go, or there was no holding you back. You were going to go no matter what. But either way, for 20 minutes, you just held the space and let you have your feelings. And there was something, I'm sure, very healing in that. So all that being addressed, the primary thing I'm noticing in my profession, the difference between men and women who come to therapy is most men. It's funny because I was a hairstylist before I was a therapist, which is a whole other story. But it was similar in that the men came because their partners said, you got to go, right? You got to go get a real haircut. You got to go get help. If you don't do that, I'm leaving, right? The ultimatum, the push, the final last straw. If I don't do this, I'm a goner. I have to go. I don't need it, but anyway, she thinks so, or he thinks so. Whoever our partner is says, you need help. And I think somewhere deep inside, we know we do, but that's that nature. I have to have it together. If I need help, I'm weak and I can't take care of my partner or my kids. I can't, to me, there's sort of oftentimes I go to the caveman, like this is kind of some of our DNA differences. And for men, part of the reason there's competition, part of the reason we don't reveal where we're struggling is at the caveman level. It means our enemy is going to try to kill us, rape our wives, and kill our children. I mean, on a very fundamental DNA level. So there's something going on in the DNA that I think persists. And then culturally, we tend to build on that rather than learn how to reprogram around it. So the biggest difference between men and women coming to therapy is a resistance to acknowledge that I even need help. Then my job is to create a safe environment, very much like Steve was saying, is in this environment, it's safe to say whatever you need to say, and I will listen. And so in some ways, my job is really easy, other than I like to talk a lot. So I'm kind of I want to say things. I want to advise. I want to educate, but I learn I just need to be still and listen. So to those partners of men who can use support, who are saying, go get help. And again, to Steve, I can't do this. I've done what I can. I'm not skilled enough. I don't have what it takes. I'm too close to it. Go get help. That kind of support is very powerful. So the question, what can we do? We can encourage the people in our lives. First, we engage that conversation. I'm concerned about you. And I really want to know what's going on. Please tell me. And then listen, we don't have to fix it. And then the next thing is push. It's like, I think it would be really helpful if you sought professional help.
Yeah.
And then
Thank you, James.
Follow up. How is that going? Did you ever call anybody? Can I help you do that? The things we can take action in to help our friends and our loved ones. So
that's superb. And I'd like to reiterate, thank you, James, for that. Man Cave is awesome. And this is great to have a validation from a woman who's been watching us for many months now, possibly getting on for years. Man Cave is awesome. Thank you, Andy, for taking the reins. Great group and so much value to the community. And yeah, I'd like to thank you as well, Andy, for doing that. And I know, in you reviewing it, telling people about it, and Gary there, I know that I have made male friends who I can call out of the Man Cave situation, and I hadn't realised it quite in that way. We mentioned Frank, and then the standing joke with Frank is it's like where's Waldo or where's Wally? It's where's Frank? Missing in action in the Algarve. MIA does stand for missing in the Algarve now, but I know I can ring him. I could ring him at any time based on what we put ourselves through or how we held ourselves up to each other in the early days of the Man Cave and the spirit of the Man Cave. And same with you, Gary, I should add. We can call each other, can't we? Which is an amazing thing anyway, and an extra amazing thing that we're foreigners in a strange country and we've got that added safety net or facility or whatever you might call it. So I'm really grateful to how that's all turned out. And love you, Frank, wherever you are. It's probably on a beach having a beer right now. Not not too bothered by things. An example to us all, Gary.
Let's take an example of what you're saying there. being confident enough to ask somebody for, to listen, to help. And we've proven we can do it. We can do it. And the ultimate sort of example of this is if you take a wartime situation where guys are in action together, right, and their lives depend on it, you will find no finer brotherhood than that point in time. Yeah. So why must we wait for a war to happen to look after each other like this? We can do it. We bloody well can do it, and we can do it well. So let's rethink about it, right, and put it into a modern situation where we can just be there and listen to somebody. Don't have to judge, don't have to give advice, but just listen, because it is possible. We do it every week, so let's do it.
Love you, Bab. Thank you for that. Right, we're in our last few minutes, and it's only right that we should all have a say in the spirit of things.
One last thing.
Go on, Andy.
The man cave is there for your back. Yeah, we've got your back.
Yeah. That's the motto. We'll have to find out what that is in Latin.
One other thing. Yeah, there was a thing earlier that men are perpetual 12-year-olds. I could probably agree with that. We're probably emotionally childlike. And I know my female members of my family and my wife and probably every other woman I've met regard men as just a big 12-year-old boy. And maybe this is the thing that women are fundamentally more developed always, and maybe they should be the ones that we should actually listen to as well.
It's a good point. It's a good point. Which might have a lot of support, I think. But maybe that's the theme for the man cave tomorrow night. Should men listen more to women? You'll get a lot more women tuning in tomorrow if you do that. So in traditional man cave style, it just maybe a minute or so each to go round. Thank you so much for being here this morning for the massive Movember man chat. For at least giving me the chance to make that alliterative catchphrase there. So this is the chance, fellas. I mean, I think it's important to to do everything that we're meant to be doing in Movember, but also honour the 12-year-old, that we do like banter and humour, and that we do like to fix things. So with that in mind, a kind of light-hearted fix that we could move forward with. Because we have to be our nature as well, don't we? Rather than just trying to deny it, which is what we're talking about here, is not repressing things. So this is a fine at this moment now to fix things in that male way in these last couple of minutes each. What would you say moving forward then? Let's go around the screen. Gene, what would be your sort of? We've done the diagnosis really. What will be the prescription? Sending men out into the world now.
I think the prescription is for every single one of us and every single person who's watching this. Is, as Steve said before, and I loved it, like in the next week, reach out to 2 of your friends that you haven't had contact with in a few weeks, a month, maybe a year, and just reach out to just check in. Because I don't think we, especially COVID has screwed up so many things. And this is a great example of like being able to reach out and make a difference. So that's everyone's homework for the next week.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being here in the early hours of the morning. Happy Thanksgiving to you and all your family over there. James?
Yes, twofold. One is a motto that I learned through an amazing organization called Challenge Day. And their motto is notice, choose, and act. So we're not free to make a choice until we notice there's a choice to be made. So that calls men especially into self-awareness. Look within, see what's going on, then make a choice about it. What do I want to do about what I'm discovering? And then take the action that's consistent with that choice, right? So that overall theme. And a big part of that would be, I would highly recommend for all adults, but especially men who are taught to not be a boy at a very early age, it's time to be a man, is to find that child, be playful, discover it, play with your children are a great opportunity to be a child, because you just get down with them and they don't think you're weird, they think you're fun, right? So men, please, especially men, let's allow ourselves to be playful, to be 6 or 7, not just 12, be all of it, and let ourselves be fully expressed, including that child that got kind of put away at a very young age.
Well said. Can we have that acronym again? Notice,
Notice, choose, and act. It's a three. And to me, life is that: notice, choose, act, run around. Then they recommended ultimately celebrate, pat yourself on the back, acknowledge the fact that you've done something constructive in that process. But notice, choose, and act. On and on and on.
That's a great 3-step. I was hoping it was going to be NAC so we could talk about knackers and be, but then, it didn't work out that way. Thank you, James, for that so much. Andy, a man cave moment, the roundup, your conclusion or your suggestion, or your manly fix.
My manly fix was a good old saying, isn't it? A problem shared is a problem halved. If you know someone or if you think that you want to get something off your chest, get it off your chest. It's not healthy to carry it around. So anyone that you can confide in, or any of our cave dwellers, will be, I'm sure, happy to listen. And also, one last piece of advice: never borrow a pen from Jean.
For the most useful takeaway today. Thank you very much for that, Andy. Francis.
I think for me, it's don't collapse in a heap on the floor before you realize you have to take a look at who you are and where you've come from and where you are standing now. Because I think we had that thing about man up and not being a good thing. And for me, I've realized that there's a level of man up to being courageous enough to actually admit that you've lost the inner child, you've lost that inside. We sit down and we have this naughty banter in the group chat while we're waiting to get to keep those things that make you and admit when things are tough, and then I think you'll be all right. Many hands make light work. Make light work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Francis, and thank you for sharing your personal experience there. A very extraordinary and moving moment there that we can all learn from. Thank you so much, and thanks again for making this happen.
Thank you.
Beginning, Stephen.
Yeah, two quick things. Hank just made a comment about, as a fellow mental 12-year-old, the anger is something I deal with. When I had massive issues after my dad died 12 years ago, the anger was the thing that kept me alive. The fact that I could not use the anger, but I felt the anger, it proved to me that I wasn't dead inside. It proved that I did still feel something. It may not have been appropriate, but at least I felt something, and that was a position for me to move on from. And the other thing is, in all of these conversations, and it's a random thing that turned up on Facebook the other day about relationships and marriage, actually, but it was when someone's asking you for support or help or trying to talk to you, to ask them, do they want comfort or solutions?
Yes.
So that you know what they're actually after, rather than imposing I think they need me to listen. And they actually just want you to say, pick up the phone, talk to somebody, do this. Or they just need you to listen. So knowing what that person wants from you in that moment is as important as being there in the first place, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Erudite as ever. Thank you very much to Garvo, man of reason, as his moniker and his the reputation in the man cave. And as I was saying yesterday, a David Beckham lookalike, or who David Beckham would like to look like in years to come, I was thinking.
Well, I don't know about that, mate. I'd rather it be the other way around. Carl, I want you to indulge me just for a couple of minutes, right?
Go on.
Because, you saw that slide earlier, right? If you can just put this up full screen for me, I just want people to get a visual representation of what we're on about here, right? If you can blow that up full screen for me.
Yes, I'll do that. Yeah,
that's a graph. That's a graph of suicides between men, women, and total people in general, right? And as you walk along that graph, where it's highest, as we've discussed, is sort of middle age, sort of between 40, 49. But you can see the spike at the other end. As you get older as well, it rises again. Yeah. Well, if you look at that map, it tells a story. Yeah. You go through your teenage years and you have a bit of fun, this, that, and the other. You may have issues, and we've established that particular age group is rising to be concerned with, right? But midlife, and there it is. In your midlife, men often have the midlife crisis. You know, they go through, you know, they have families, they have relationship breaks up, etc. And as you like tail off towards the end, a man becomes older. Yeah, he may get sick, he may lose his partner, and you know, sometimes he might think to himself, I just can't be bothered anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. But if you come back to me now, right, I want to say just a couple of important things.
You might have to unshare your graph.
Yeah, right, I'm back again. Right. I can't remember which version of the Man Cave it was, but we were discussing this topic, and I had the audacity to ask how many men ever considered taking their own lives, even just fleetingly, right? Just as for my own representation in my own mind. And I would say probably it was a good 70% put their hands up, to be honest, and say, you know, that they'd thought about it. Now, that's quite staggering. That tells you that the problem is much bigger than you think it is. So next time you see a mate who looks a bit down, or you think, even if you just think, you might just need a chat, do it, because in that chat, you might just have saved his life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is what they teach you on suicide training, is just to be frank with people. And ask the question, because, you know, it's a high-risk strategy not to ask, isn't it? Let's face it.
Absolutely. You know, what have you got to lose, really? They can tell you to sod off, but that's about it. I think Andy wants to come up with something.
Oh, just last thing as well. Some years ago, I did some voluntary work for Samaritans. Now, I'm not any sort of religious faith person, but Samaritans aren't basically anything to do with the religion. But in the UK, they're a really good organisation for harm and suicide prevention. And it's basically a phone line. You can phone up as well, and it's free to use. And these people are incredible. It's all voluntary based, and they get really busy around Christmas as well. So if anyone does want a complete neutral party, don't forget there's people out there that you can phone up as well.
Thank you for that, because that's a good point. I mean, many people feel the same way about Thanksgiving, don't they, as they do about Christmas, and it can intensify difficult feelings people have. So, yeah, great to have those helplines available, and equally great to have the network that's available. If you're not part of the Man Cave network, you'll have a warm welcome tomorrow night if you're inspired to join in from what you've heard today. I think a final word from James here.
Yes, I will be brief. I just want to say, in my experience, Gary, the 70% was probably 30% deficient by the men who weren't willing to own it. In my experience, every single one of us at some point in our life, at least once, has thought, I'd be better off dead. Right. So suicidation is normal. We don't want to make it like some disease or something horrible that happens to only particular people. We all experience that from time to time. Yeah. And suicide is progressive. You can see the signs. So when someone starts giving their stuff away and stops making plans for the future and starts saying goodbye to people, that's like red flag. Jump on it. Tell them ask them what's going on. If they're just thinking about, like, sometimes I think I'd be better off dead. If a client tells me that, I have a personal and professional obligation to check in. And I ask the question, so does that mean you just think it would be easier if you weren't alive, or are you planning to kill yourself? Yes. I ask the question that directly. I don't call it suicide, because what it is killing yourself. Yeah. And inevitably, I'll get the answer I need from that. But the bottom line on that is it's normal to have those thoughts from time to time.
I always thought so. I was there on that Man Cave, and I just thought, well, hell yeah! Didn't everybody think that at some point? So it was an interesting evening, as many of them were. So last few comments from people. Then, thanks, chaps. It's been amazing this morning. We should do this more often, shouldn't we? But then not formalize and ritualize this sort of opening up as a special program. This can be a way of life, can't it? Matty, Man Cave has a reserved spot in my Friday evening agenda. Even my girlfriend has to wait. And the women, they were invited. And there was so much talk about a lady cave, lady garden, wasn't there? But it never happened, fortunately for me, in many ways. So amazing to have someone who is not personally invested in your situation to talk with, someone outside your circle who is basically neutral. It's amazing. A tick for therapy there. Joel has a job interview. So Solar Life Portugal is obviously Pete Bleach. I've made the connection now. Sure, we can all wish him luck. Absolutely. Our Portuguese mate, Joel, who was there from the get-go on the man cave. Fingers crossed for that fella. Everything crossed. I'll cross my testicles for Joel at the risk of ending up in the emergency room with Jean. Yeah, listen to bring it, says Jean. Yeah, listen to the women. Really helpful conversation. Thank you all. Thank you, Lonnie. I'm sure you'll be in this mix as soon as well. And when we have other discussions, Jess, my 12-year-old mind is a big pouter. We can recognize that as well, can't we? Someone criticizes or says something to me I don't like, I'll withdraw and clam up like a stubborn child. Well, hopefully a few of the pointers this morning, Jess, have been useful. I think there's a few nods of recognition of that. And in Portuguese, look at this, Elra. Deita cá para fora. That's the problem. I think that's a problem shared is a problem halved in Portuguese there. Just on a pronunciation point, accent point. It's France is South African. I recognise that accent. Well spotted. Well spotted, Ana Lucia. Fine photograph as well, if I may say, in a kind of blokey way. From Michelle, obrigada, lovely chaps. Thank you to you, Michelle. Lots of love to you in Australia. And Hank, loving the comfort or solution. That was great intervention there. Cheers, James, for that. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And just another invitation to the all-important man cave. Get in touch, Portuglish on YouTube. That's exactly what you need to subscribe to. Get an alert and you can jump on and you can talk there. Well done, men. We'll take this praise, won't we, chaps? From Taxi and Sue's there. Good conversation, chaps. Being ex-military, I can relate to all the points raised. Cheers, Mike. Iris, thank you. You guys for bearing it all. You're true strong men. Please continue to set this great example for the younger generation. God bless you, Iris. Thank you for that. It's really nice to hear that. What a beautiful start to my birthday. Oh, yes, parabéns a você, a group of handsome, thoughtful, vulnerable men. But to you all, how about that? That was worth turning up for. Ladies have lady caves all the time. Just pick up the phone and talk for hours. Yeah, you got a point there, Elra. This conversation is meant to be ongoing and not safe for Movember. Yeah, good point. Testicular torsion is not something you want. All right, Joel, I'll just draw the line at my fingers. Just a simple twist. Just a simple
I'll stick to knitting, Carl.
Yes. Is that what they're doing in that Bhangra dance when they're just twisting like that?
Yeah, it's true. It's the detorsion.
Detorsion. Okay,
That's
Mrs. M, I've got a plan for after the show, especially if you can't untie them and they get into. We knew it would degenerate into this, didn't we? Great show today, very real. Cheers, Margarita. Yes, love to you there from Andy, of course. Let it out here. Oh, that is great. There's your Portuguese man cave motto, isn't it? Whatever it was that was said by Elra earlier on. We'll cut and paste that. That's fantastic. Let it out here. Superb. Thank you.
Some of these guys, though, might take that more literally, I think.
You've got to remember they've got their cameras on.
Yeah, clothing is required.
I can imagine the stink of the farts.
Always there we go. We're right back to being 12-year-olds, as you would hope. Always the best part of the day is to you with you wonderful people. Cheers, Hank. Parabéns to Rebel Mama from Antonio, and Abel's popped in as well. Morning, guys. Just tuned in. Thought this was the men version of Loose Women. Well, kind of, except we don't swear on air. Well, they do in the man cave. It's allowed there. Cheers, fellas. Thank you so much for being in this morning. I've really appreciated this. I was thinking, let's do it again soon, but let's extrapolate, generalize this to a way of being and encourage all men to do that. Thank you so much. Ciao for now, and we'll see you tomorrow.